I'll be talking about premise in this brief video. What is a premise? What's the difference between a premise that's effective and one that's not? And why bother putting any effort into writing one? Lyons provides a good answer to the why bother question. Before writing characters, before writing scenes, before worrying about your act breaks, you have to first know you have a story that will work. A solid premise helps ensure you'll have a story that works. And you'll know that with confidence even before you've written the first page. So what is a premise? Bernhardt offers a concise definition. Premise is the fundamental idea or concept underpinning your story. This is true, but it's so slim and trim, it's not much practical use. Is a premise a sentence? A paragraph? A page? Which story elements feature prominently in a premise? I don't disagree with Bernhardt. A premise is a fundamental idea or concept underpinning a story, but there's more to it than that. Here's John Truby's definition. It offers more guidance. The premise is your story stated in one sentence. It is the simplest combination of character and plot and typically consists of some event that starts the action, some sense of the main character, and some sense of the outcome of the story. That's a content-dense sentence, one loaded with action, character, and plot. I'll return to Truby's definition in just a moment. I can't stress this enough. An effective premise is critical to story success. It's the one decision on which the rest of the writing process depends. Plot, character, theme, symbol. Some writers confuse premise and logline. An effective premise will help you compose a logline when the time comes. The purpose and timing, however, are different. Your logline will grow eventually from your premise when it's time to market your story. Let's unpack Truby's definition. There's an event that starts the action, there's some sense of the main character, and there's some sense of the outcome. We need more for a truly effective premise. Remember, a story is an interesting character who wants something badly and is having trouble getting it. Something is missing, conflict, tension. Your premise needs some sense of an obstacle, preferably an antagonist. The difference between a good premise and a more effective premise can be just a word or two. Let's look at Truby's premise for The Godfather. The youngest son of a mafia family takes revenge on the men who shot his father and becomes the new Godfather. Who cares that Michael is the youngest son? What matters is that Michael Corleone is the reluctant son of an aging mafia don, one who wants to transfer control over his criminal empire. In the case of Truby's example, I'd argue that simply replacing youngest with reluctant is a big improvement. Not only does Michael Corleone have external opposition from other mafia crime families, he's also internally conflicted. Here's a couple of my own examples. The Wizard of Oz. After a Kansas twister transports a girl to a magical land, she sets on a dangerous journey to find a wizard with the power to send her home. With The Wizard of Oz, we have an event that starts the action. A twister lifts her house and deposits it in the heart of Munchkinland. There's some sense of the main character, a girl. We could amplify that a bit, make her a lonely girl or a rural girl. There's a sense of the outcome. She has to locate the Wizard of Oz. And there's a sense of the obstacles she'll face. It's a dangerous journey. Or let's consider Argo for a moment. A CIA operative masterminds a fake Hollywood movie to rescue 6 Americans during the Iranian hostage crisis. We have the Iranian hostage crisis as the event that kicks off the story. There's a CIA operative for a sense of the main character. Rescue gives us some sense of the outcome. It turns out that the hostage crisis is also the obstacle, and that's okay. Sometimes one element can do double duty. Here we even get a bonus. We get a hint at the main character's plan, a scheme involving a fake Hollywood movie. Air Force One. Terrorists hijack Air Force One and hold the president's family hostage in exchange for the release of their comrades in a Russian prison. One sentence says it pretty much all. For a logline, this is swell. As a premise, it's missing one important element. Who's the main character? Who foils the terrorist plot? The president, a former Congressional Medal of Honor winner. We need to get that detail in there for an effective premise. John Truby's advice is write something that may change your life. When you write about something that's important to you, that's the best way to ensure others will care. Writing is all about self-exploration, and premise is the place to start. Truby recommends that you start with a list of everything you'd like to see or read. Your list doesn't have to be complete story concepts. You can include themes you feel passionate about, interesting characters, stimulating dialogue, whatever excites your story imagination. Then you create a list of every premise you've ever thought of. Expect to spend a lot of time on these lists. Once you've got your lists, study both of them side by side. Don't censor yourself. Don't worry about what's practical. When you discover common patterns, ask yourself one of these questions. What fascinates me about this idea? Or what inspires me about this idea? Or what do I love about this idea? This bit of self-exploration will take time. It won't guarantee your story will change your life, but it will expose core elements that really matter to you. Some effective brainstorming suggestions. Don't just settle for the first premise that comes to mind and start writing. Explore your options. Ask yourself, what would happen if? What would happen if the idealistic son of a ruthless mafia don vows to leave the family business? Different story paths are possible. One of them leads to The Godfather. Or an even more famous example, what would happen if two teens fall madly, head over heels in love, and their families forbade them to ever see one another again? One story path leads to Romeo and Juliet. Others lead to entirely different stories. What are the qualities of a good premise? One is you should be able to see the entire story. Think back to the premise for Air Force One. We need to work in that the main character is the President of the United States. We should also include he's a former Congressional Medal of Honor winner. Let's try again. When terrorists hijack Air Force One and hold the president's family hostage in exchange for the release of their comrades in a Russian prison, the president, a former Medal of Honor winner, hides on board and fights the terrorists. Can you see an entire story from this premise? A premise should also generate multiple story ideas. In this case, the multiple stories unfold as we ask, what will the president do? Will he give in to the terrorist demands? How will he save the hostages? There's a lot of story to explore in that premise. Conflict should be built into the premise. Here we have the President of the United States versus Russian terrorists, a pairing guaranteed to generate conflict. You create characters to maximize conflict. When you do, you give yourself more to write about. You give the characters more to worry about. And remember, high stakes yield high success. Air Force One raises the stakes. It's not just the life of the president versus terrorists. The president's family is among the hostages. As John D. MacDonald once said, story is stuff happens to people you care about. The major steps to developing a premise start with define your main character, then define your hero's problem, and define how the hero will solve the problem. Let's look at a quick example, one where premise and the log line are the same. The movie Liar Liar. After his son's birthday wish, a shyster lawyer cannot tell a lie for 24 hours on the day of the biggest trial in his career. This dude has a problem. Who's the main character? A father who happens to also be a shyster lawyer, one who makes his living by lying. What's the hero's problem? He has two problems here. He needs to win a major case, or maybe he'll lose his job, and he needs to keep the love and respect of his son. Comedy flows from these two seemingly irreconcilable problems. He looks at a blue pen and tries to say, this is a red pen. He can't. He knows the case is bogus, so he can't try it and win. So he mugs himself in the bathroom, hoping for a continuance. No go. In the case of Liar Liar, an entire movie flows from that premise. Many writers rush the premise. That's a mistake. It's true that some premises are so compelling, the stakes are so obvious, you can write them in a day or two. Others, not so easy. It's best to take the time up front before writing a single word of your story. You'll be living with your premise for months. Better to spend a week or 2 or 3 thinking it through than investing more time just to hit a wall. There's nothing you can do to rescue a story with a weak premise. You can experiment with your premise, see what forms your story can take even before you've written a single word. Give yourself time to explore those creative possibilities. Hollywood loves high concept. What's that? A catchy, one-line description that viewers will instantly understand and rush to watch at the theater. High concept is valuable for a logline. For a premise, not so much. High concept is not the goal for an effective premise. It gives you only one or two scenes, the scene before and after the hook. We want more from a premise. What are some examples of weak premises? One is the derivative premise. For example, a famous mystery writer solves crimes with his wife, a San Francisco police detective. The derivative premise sounds like a movie or TV show we've just seen. In this case, a lame example. That's the TV show Castle, shifted from New York City to San Francisco. Another problem premise is the generic premise. Here we have another lame example. A man must find his wife's killer before it's too late. In this case, the premise is non-specific. We do have an event that triggers our story, a murder, but what's missing is some sense of the main character and some sense of the outcome of the story. Let's summarize. A premise is a one-sentence synopsis that includes an event that starts the action, some sense of the main character, some sense of the outcome, some sense of the obstacle or antagonist, and some sense of the stakes. That's a lot to fit in one sentence. My advice is take your time and craft it well. The major steps to developing a premise include define your main character, define the hero's problem, define the stakes, and define how the hero will solve the problem. My name is Glenn Mitchell. I'm an award-winning screenwriter with Radically Chic Productions. Feel free to reach out to me at gmitchel850@yahoo.com. Cheers.